Joining us now, House of Delegates member, Democrat, Northern Virginia, Mark Levine. Good to have you with us, Mark.
Thanks for having me, John.
So, Mark, let's cut to the chase here. You sent me an email and you called me the other day, and you said that in an interview I did with Nick Fredericks a week ago that I misrepresented some of the statements that you made, and I said, well, why don't you come on the air and tell everybody what you actually did say and set the record straight, Mark.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, you basically said on air that I said that people who didn't support my bill were Nazis, and obviously I didn't say that. And what I did say,
which bill, though? Which bill? Go back to the bill.
Go ahead.
Go back to what we were talking about. So give everyone the background on it.
Sure.
What was the bill?
Absolutely. So I introduced actually 5 bills this session relating to firearms. In fact, Democrats introduced some 70 bills. None of them passed except for one that on a license plate that says "Stop Gun Violence," and even that one was held up for a long period of time. And after Parkland, I tell you, a lot of people are very angry. A lot of Democrats are angry. A lot of Republicans are angry that we're doing so little to stop gun violence. So I sent an email to my constituents going through all the things that we could stop if we had background checks. And, of course, background checks would prevent sales, which are perfectly legal now, sales of guns to gang members, to terrorists, to people who perpetrate domestic violence, people who are so violently deranged that they are put in involuntarily committed to mental facilities. And all these people can just go out and buy a gun. And, of course, 97% of Americans support background checks. This isn't something that's, frankly, a Democratic or Republican thing. I don't know anything else that 97% of Americans agree on. And so I was calling out the Republicans for not allowing this bill to have a chance to go to the floor where I think it would pass.
All right, so, Mark, I kind of get what you're saying about your bill, but Nick Fredericks made a speech a week ago that actually got like 15 or 16 million views. And basically, he called the Democrats out for some of the things that you were saying in the House well. And he said that specifically your language was inflammatory. Obviously, there was something that made Nick Fredericks give that speech. What is it exactly that you said in the well that got Nick and so many other Republicans so mad?
I actually said nothing in the will that I know of that made Republicans mad. I stood up once to say that video games don't cause gun violence, but I don't think that was it. No, what happened was an email that I sent to my constituents, an email that you can still find today on my website at markfordelegate.com. And it's a very strongly worded email. It says basically how the GOP makes it easy, I think is the word I use, makes it easy to commit mass murder, which is very, very strong language. It's not calling them Nazis, but it talks about the history of assault rifles, of the AR-15, which is the weapon of choice for mass murderers. It's the weapon that was used in Las Vegas, at Parkland, in Colorado, in Newtown. And this is a weapon that was effectively banned until 2004, when actually national Republicans, congressional Republicans, removed the assault weapons ban, let it die, right. And then 1.4 million of them were bought. And it talks about this gun and why it's so good at killing and so good. It's a weapon of war. It was first used by the Nazis, but then, of course, the Russians created the Kalashnikov. The Americans created the M16. It's sold today. It's semi-automatic, but it's sold with attachments that make it nearly fully automatic, according to the manufacturers. Those are the bump stocks that I tried to ban. And they even brag, the manufacturer, that this gets around machine gun laws. So these are the laws that I'm fighting Republicans on. It's not personal, but it is political. It is policy. And I think most Americans don't want these guns sold on the streets to gang members, to terrorists, to violent people, people who have long histories of violence. One of the things I said that I know made Nick Fredericks mad is that we had an election last year where Ed Gillespie complained about the MS-13, complained about this very violent gangs. Well, it is legal to sell guns to the MS-13 in Virginia. I don't think it should be. I think that if you had a universal background check and it flags someone as, oh, this is a gang member, then it shouldn't be legal to sell to that gang member. So I have, very strong feelings about this, and I think most Virginians do too. And, Nick's speech, he talks about the abortion industry. He talks about the welfare policies of the 60s. I understand that well, many people have strong views on abortion. I get it. Pro-choice, pro-life. I've had many of those debates. I don't think abortion causes gun violence. And I'd love if you'd ask Nick Freitas the connection between abortions and gun violence. You can strongly disagree with abortions, but I think if you think abortions are causing gun violence rather than easy sale of these dangerous weapons to dangerous people, which is what I think leads to gun violence, I think my view is a little bit more logical than his.
Well, Mark Levine, if you're a believer in the Second Amendment and you think that the Founding Fathers, by passing this, gave every American the right to arm and defend themselves, which I believe, and as do Second Amendment advocates, I mean, when you make a statement in an email and you say that Republicans make it easier for people to commit mass murder, I mean, don't you think that's a little over the top, Mark?
Well, John, do you believe that every American has the right to bear arms? Someone who's a murderer, do they have a right to bear arms? A gang member, a terrorist, they all have the right to bear arms, in your view?
No, but that's not what I asked.
Someone who's a killer? No, of course not, right?
I didn't ask that. That has nothing to do with this argument. Of course I don't.
You just said the Second Amendment gives every American the right to bear arms.
Well,
I think you would agree that obviously people who've committed horrendous crimes are people who have shown a propensity to commit horrendous crimes.
That wasn't Mark. In all fairness, that was not what your email. I mean, I just read your email while you were talking again. That was not what your email was not saying, hey, because of universal background checks and an MS-13 member could buy a gun, Republicans are part of the problem. I mean, you basically blanketed the whole thing and said, if you're a Republican, you make it easier to commit mass murder. I mean, when you make that statement, I mean, isn't there an accountability that goes with that? I mean, if you make it and you believe in it, just say it. Say, yeah, I believe all Republicans are accountable for mass murder because they support gun rights. I mean, either own up to the statement or disavow the statement. Mark?
Well, no, let me be very clear. All right, I believe that the policies of both Republicans in Congress and Republicans in the House of Delegates have made it easier to commit mass murder. I think their policies have done that. I think that these mass murders didn't happen as frequently until Republicans made it easy for these very dangerous people to get these very dangerous weapons. Now, do I think all Republicans believe this? No. I can give you an example from 2 years ago. When I talked with a Republican delegate, I had a bill, by the way, to say that you couldn't sell guns to terrorists, because I don't think you should be able to sell guns in Virginia to members of al-Qaeda. Nick Freitas very bravely fought terrorists over there in the Middle East, but at home, I don't think we should be able to sell them guns. So I had a bill to do that. And it died in the Republican House of Delegates. It died in subcommittee. And I actually talked with a Republican afterwards. And I spoke to him because he agreed with me that terrorists should not be able to buy guns in Virginia. And we talked about how to do a better bill for the next year. And we talked throughout 2016. And then he came back to me very sorrowful and said, Mark, I want to work with you. I agree with you. But the Republican leadership will not allow me to work on a bill that stops terrorists from buying guns. And he was very disappointed, and I was very disappointed too. And I said, well, you can work with us. He said, nope, he can't do it because Republican leadership in the House wouldn't let him do it. And what's really interesting is this guy, very nice guy, lost his race in 2017. And that race included issues of gun violence. So because this Republican wasn't willing to buck his leadership, even though he personally agreed with me on this, he lost his race. And I think that should be a lesson to Virginia Republicans and national Republicans. If you do nothing but thoughts and prayers, if you do nothing to stop gun violence, you're going to lose some of your political races. And so, no, I don't think all Republicans do this, but I think the leadership does.
What terrorist who's on a terrorist FBI list right now can go in and buy an AR-15? I'm confused here. What loophole...
In Virginia, there is no
allows terrorists to buy guns?
In Virginia, there's no law prohibiting the sale of guns to terrorists without a background check. In fact, even a licensed firearms dealer, they're actually not included in the background check system. Now, some states like New Jersey have said that you cannot sell guns to terrorists. But, of course, it's not just terrorists. It's gang violence. It's perpetrators of domestic violence. It's those that have been involuntarily committed. The heart of it is this. If you sell a gun to someone You can sell over the internet. You can sell no background check required. All of this is perfectly legal in Virginia, and I don't think it should be. And what's interesting is that 97% of Americans, including 97% of gun owners, agree with me on this. So this should be a way we should be able to work together. The thing I said was that law-abiding people have nothing to fear from background checks. Most of them have bought guns in gun stores. They've already passed a background check, which usually takes less than a minute. They don't have anything to fear. The people who have to fear from background checks are the bad people that none of us should want to have guns, whether it's gang members or terrorists or anybody else.
So, Mark, look, I mean, you can't buy a gun over the internet. It's illegal if you haven't done a background check. I mean, that doesn't mean
that's not true,
that
John.
you can
John,
break the law, but you just can't go and buy a gun without a background check. So I don't know what you're talking about.
John. I actually had a bill to prohibit it. What you can do legally in Virginia is you can go over the internet and you can say, I am willing to sell an AR-15 with no questions asked and no background checks.
But
and
that's
someone
illegal.
writes you back on the internet and says, yeah, I want to buy. And then you say, sure, meet me at this alley in Richmond, and I'll sell you the gun, and that's perfectly legal.
But that's a private sale. That's not through a not through a dealer.
That's a private sale, but through strangers that met over the internet. That's exactly right.
Yeah, but anybody can sell anything on a private.
Well, I mean,
that's legal, and I don't think it should be. Do you think it should be?
Look, no. I've been in favor.
I'd like to see passed the General Assembly. I actually put that bill forward in 2016. It said if you meet a stranger over the internet for a gun sale, you have to have a background check. That's one of my bills that died in a subcommittee. That, again, it's not like Republicans are willing to work with me to improve the bill. I mean, I'm not wedded to any particular language, but that's one of the things that I don't think should be legal in Virginia, because I want good guys to have guns. I don't want bad guys to have guns.
Well, look, that's why I've been in favor
one of the things I'm complaining about.
That's why I've been in favor of closing the gun sale loophole, although many people tell me there is no loophole. There is a loophole, and the loophole is I can buy the gun from a dealer and sell it to somebody else in the parking lot behind the van.
That's right.
And
That's exactly
everybody,
right. So
everybody knows that.
And you are reasonable on these issues.
I
wish some of my colleagues were. In fact,
Well,
actually, to be fair, again, some of them are, but have been shut down by the leadership, which is why when I said Republicans, I talked about congressional Republicans and Virginia Republicans. I want to be clear. So I was not referring to all Republicans. Obviously, you're a Republican. I'm referring to the ones that pass legislation. I'm referring to the elected ones who in control. I mean, even as I said, some delegates were willing to work with me, but were told by their by their state party, their leadership, that they couldn't. So I'm not saying that Republicans don't agree with me. 97% of Americans agree with me. What made me upset is that the elected leadership of the Republican Party in Virginia, and frankly nationally as well, does not allow these issues to even be debated on the floor where they should be and where I think they'd pass.
All right. Well, the bottom line is it is illegal to buy a gun from a gun dealer in Virginia without a background check.
That's true.
It is not illegal.
That is absolutely true.
It is not illegal to buy a gun in a private sale, right? And if somebody wants, and now when McAuliffe made the compromise, and I've only got 20 seconds here. When Terry McAuliffe made the reciprocal gun compromise, one of the things on the background checks is that he encouraged anybody selling a gun to do the background check, but it's not mandated. So again, I can go to a gun show, I can buy a gun from a dealer, do a background check, I can go out in the back, and somebody can offer me double the price, and if I feel like selling it, I don't have to do squat. I mean, that's what the loophole is.
Even if that guy is a terrorist or a gang member.
That's what the loophole is, and that's the people that holler at me and say, oh, there's no loophole. That's what the loophole is. It's under the guise of a private sale. And now that person doesn't have to be a terrorist. That person could have just gotten a restraining order from their significant other.
That's right.
I'm out of time. I got to go. Mark, thank you for setting the record straight. John Fredericks live in Doha, Qatar. I'll be right back.